Millionaire pretends to be poor at his bar. Black Waitress's response left him speechless. Adrian Cole, owner of a successful chain of bars, returned to the city after 6 months abroad handling investors. He'd been hearing complaints that one of his branches had turned toxic, rude staff, careless service, a manager who treated employees badly. Adrian didn't tell anyone he was back. He hated fake smiles, so he decided to visit the place as a regular, broke-looking customer, dressed in a plain hoodie to see how customers were truly treated. He expected poor service. He did not expect to meet her. Lena Hart, a 27-year-old black waitress, worked at the bar to pay off her late mother's hospital bills. She was quiet, soft-spoken, always tired but always gentle. She never argued back, even when the manager humiliated her in front of customers, when staff blamed her for mistakes she didn't make, when she worked double shifts because others quit last minute. Despite everything, Lena treated every customer with kindness, something she learned from her mother. You don't know what someone is carrying. Be gentle. That night, the bar was understaffed. The manager was in a terrible mood, and Lena was covering tables alone. When Adrian walked in, dressed like an ordinary man with barely 2 coins in his pocket, other waiters ignored him, assuming he wouldn't tip. Lena didn't. She walked up with a small, genuine smile. "Hi, welcome. Can I get you anything?" Her voice was soft, her tone kind, her eyes tired but warm. It was the first moment of real kindness Adrian had received in months. While Lena served him, the manager suddenly shouted at her across the room, humiliating her in front of customers loud enough that Adrian froze. That was the moment everything changed. Adrian wasn't just disappointed, he was angry. This was High's business, High's staff, High's responsibility, and the only person who treated him with basic respect was the one being treated the worst. That's when Adrian decided Lena wasn't just a waitress, she was the person he was going to protect, and the one who would unknowingly change his entire life. Before we go deeper into this story, I want you to drop a comment telling me where you are watching from and what time is it. If you are new to this channel, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Adrian Cole had built his bar empire from a single location inherited from his grandfather into a chain of 12 successful establishments across 3 cities. At 38, he'd achieved financial success beyond what most people dreamed of. Multiple properties, investments generating passive income, enough wealth that he could have retired comfortably and never worked another day. But Adrian hadn't built his business for wealth accumulation. He'd built it to honor his grandfather's legacy, creating spaces where people felt welcome, where the atmosphere was warm, where every customer mattered regardless of how much they spent. His grandfather had believed bars weren't just about alcohol, but about community, about providing space for people to connect and feel less alone. Adrian had carried those values forward as he'd expanded. Every new location was carefully designed to feel inviting rather than intimidating. He'd trained managers extensively on treating staff well, believing happy employees created better customer experiences. He'd implemented above-market wages, profit-sharing bonuses, comprehensive benefits, all the things that made working at Cole's bars desirable employment rather than just another service industry job. Or at least, that's what Adrian had believed he'd created. 6 months ago, he'd traveled to Europe meeting with potential investors interested in helping him expand internationally. The meetings had been successful, contracts signed, expansion plans developed. Adrian had been away longer than intended, handling details, building relationships, laying groundwork for Cole's first international locations. During that time, he'd received periodic reports from his regional manager about operations at the 12 domestic locations. The reports had been mostly positive, steady profits, minimal staff turnover at most locations, customer satisfaction scores holding strong, except for one location. The downtown branch had been showing concerning patterns, customer complaints increasing, online reviews deteriorating, staff turnover accelerating. 3 different servers had quit in the past 2 months, which was unusual for Cole's bars where people typically stayed years. The regional manager had attributed it to the new manager Adrian had hired just before leaving for Europe. Trevor's struggling with the leadership aspects, the regional manager had reported during their weekly call. He's efficient operationally, but rough with staff. I've been coaching him, but might need your input when you return." Adrian had returned to the city 3 days ago, planning to address the downtown location immediately. But instead of announcing his return and scheduling formal meetings where everyone would be on their best behavior, Adrian had decided to see the problem firsthand. He wanted to understand what was really happening when management didn't know the owner was watching. So he dressed in worn jeans, an old hoodie, scuffed sneakers, clothes he'd kept from college days when he'd been working his way through business school, tending bar at his grandfather's place. He'd skipped shaving for 3 days, letting stubble obscure his normally well-groomed appearance. He'd left his expensive watch and jewelry at home, carrying only enough cash for a modest meal and drink. The transformation was remarkably effective. Adrian normally moved through his bars, being recognized immediately, staff straightening up, service becoming attentive, everyone performing their roles carefully under the owner's observation. But dressed this way, he was invisible. Just another customer, unremarkable, forgettable. He'd arrived at the downtown location on a Thursday evening, typically moderately busy but not overwhelmingly crowded. The bar occupied a corner building with large windows, exposed brick walls, comfortable seating arrangements that encouraged lingering. It should have felt welcoming. Instead, walking in, Adrian immediately sensed something off about the atmosphere. The space was clean but cold, music too loud for comfortable conversation, lighting harsh rather than ambient. Several tables sat with dirty dishes, despite the dining room being only half full. And the staff he could see looked stressed rather than engaged, moving quickly, but without the friendly energy that should characterize Cole's bars. Adrian had taken a seat at a small table near the window, positioning himself to observe the entire dining room. He'd waited 10 minutes without anyone approaching, watching servers walk past repeatedly without acknowledgement. Finally, a young waiter had glanced his way, assessed his appearance quickly, and had moved on to a better-dressed couple at a nearby table. The message had been clear: poorly dressed customer equals poor tip, not worth the attention. Adrian had been making mental notes. This was exactly the kind of discriminatory service he'd explicitly prohibited, the kind of behavior his training programs addressed when he'd noticed movement in his peripheral vision. A woman had approached his table, black, late 20s, wearing the standard Cole's Bar's server uniform of black pants and a burgundy polo shirt. She'd looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes suggesting inadequate sleep, movements carrying the weight of someone running on empty. But when she'd reached his table, she'd offered a genuine smile. "Hi," she'd said, her voice soft but warm. "Welcome to Cole's. I'm Lena. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something to drink?" The greeting had been simple, professional, exactly what servers were trained to offer. But there'd been something in Lena's delivery that had struck Adrian immediately, genuine kindness rather than performed politeness. She hadn't assessed his appearance and found him wanting. She'd simply seen another customer deserving basic courtesy. "Just water for now," Adrian had replied, testing whether the kindness extended beyond initial greeting. "And maybe a menu?" "Of course," Lena had said, already pulling a menu from her apron. "The special tonight is bourbon glazed salmon with roasted vegetables, but take your time looking everything over. I'll get that water for you." She'd returned within 2 minutes with water and silverware wrapped in a napkin, setting both down carefully. "Any questions about the menu?" Adrian had scanned the options, recognizing items he'd personally approved for this location's menu. "The burger's good here." "Really good," Lena had confirmed. "Cooked to order. Comes with house-made fries. I'd recommend it." "You eat here often?" Adrian had asked, curious about her answer. Lena had smiled slightly. "Can't afford to, on a server's salary. But I've had bites of dishes when kitchen makes mistakes and they're really well prepared. Our cook knows what he's doing." Her honesty had been refreshing. Most servers would have enthusiastically recommended everything regardless of actual quality, angling for higher bills and bigger tips. Lena had been genuine instead. "Burger sounds great," Adrian had decided. "Medium, with everything." "Perfect," Lena had said, writing the order carefully. "Should be about 15 minutes. Can I get you anything else while you wait?" "This is good for now," Adrian had assured her. "Thank you, Lena." She'd nodded and had headed toward the kitchen, and Adrian had watched her navigate the dining room with practiced efficiency. She'd checked on other tables, refilled drinks, cleared finished plates, all the routine tasks servers handled constantly. But unlike the other staff Adrian could observe, Lena had engaged genuinely with every customer, a smile for an elderly couple, patience with a family whose young children were being difficult, a kind word for a lone diner who looked as tired as Lena herself. Adrian had been mentally composing the positive feedback he'd give his regional manager about this employee when everything had changed. A man had emerged from the back office mid-40s, stocky build, wearing a manager's polo with Trevor embroidered on the chest. He'd surveyed the dining room with the kind of scrutiny that suggested he was looking for problems rather than ensuring everything ran smoothly. His eyes had landed on Lena as she'd been clearing a table near the kitchen entrance. "Lena," he'd barked, his voice loud enough to carry across the entire dining room. "Why is table 12 still dirty? I told you to bust that 20 minutes ago." Lena had looked up, clearly startled. "I'm sorry, Trevor. I've been covering the whole dining room alone since Marcus left early." "I don't want excuses," Trevor had interrupted, his tone harsh and humiliating. "I want tables cleared immediately. You think customers want to sit looking at dirty dishes? Do your job, or I'll find someone who can." The entire dining room had gone quiet. Other customers had looked uncomfortable, clearly witnessing an employee being berated publicly. Adrian had felt his jaw clench with anger. This was exactly the kind of toxic management he'd explicitly prohibited. Lena had dropped her gaze, her shoulders curling inward slightly. "Yes, sir. I'll clear it right now. And while you're at it, the bathroom needs restocking," Trevor had added, apparently not finished humiliating her. "Paper towels are low. Toilet paper needs replacing. I want it done before you take any more orders. Got it?" "That's not my responsibility," Lena had said quietly, clearly trying to maintain some boundary. "Restocking bathrooms is the shift leader's job. Your responsibility is whatever I say it is," Trevor had snapped. "Now get moving before I write you up for insubordination." Lena had nodded without further protest, quickly clearing the offending table before disappearing toward the bathrooms with cleaning supplies. Trevor had watched her go with obvious satisfaction before returning to his office. Adrian had sat frozen, processing what he'd just witnessed. This was his business, his name on the building, his values supposedly guiding operations, and a manager he'd hired was publicly humiliating the kindest employee in the place, assigning her tasks outside her job description, threatening disciplinary action for completely reasonable boundary setting. The burger had arrived 15 minutes later, delivered by a different server since Lena was apparently still dealing with bathroom duties. Adrian had barely tasted it, despite its obvious quality, his mind occupied with the situation he'd just observed. When Lena had finally returned to the dining room, she'd made her rounds checking on customers, her kindness seemingly undimmed by the public humiliation. She'd stopped by Adrian's table, offering that same genuine smile despite the exhaustion clearly weighing on her. "How's everything tasting?" she'd asked. "Really good," Adrian had confirmed honestly. "Lena, can I ask you something?" "Of course," she'd said, though wariness had flickered in her expression, probably expecting a complaint. "How long have you been working here?" The question had clearly surprised her. "About 2 years." "Why?" "Just curious," Adrian had said. "You're good at your job, very professional, kind to everyone. Seems like you should be managing by now rather than just serving." Lena had laughed, but it had sounded hollow. "Management positions don't really go to people like me here, but I appreciate you noticing the effort." "People like you?" Adrian had pressed, though he'd suspected he knew what she'd meant. "Let's just say I'm not Trevor's type of employee," Lena had replied carefully. "But it pays the bills, so I keep my head down and do the work." She'd excused herself to attend another table, leaving Adrian to process her words. Not Trevor's type of employee. Combined with the public humiliation he'd witnessed, Adrian had begun suspecting Trevor's management problems extended beyond just being rough with staff, as the regional manager had described it. Adrian had finished his meal, left cash on the table, including a $50 tip for Lena, far exceeding the normal percentage, but reflecting his appreciation for her service, and had walked out determined to address this situation immediately. But as he'd driven home that evening, Adrian had realized that simply firing Trevor and implementing new management wouldn't solve the deeper problem. He needed to understand the full scope of what was happening, how extensive the mistreatment was, whether other staff were experiencing similar issues, why Lena specifically seemed to be targeted. So, instead of making immediate changes, Adrian had decided to maintain his disguise, return to the bar multiple times, observe the patterns, gather comprehensive information before acting. He'd wanted to ensure any changes he made actually addressed root problems rather than just surface symptoms. Over the following 2 weeks, Adrian had visited the downtown location 6 different times, always dressed in his broke customer disguise, always requesting Lena's section when possible. And what he'd observed had confirmed his worst suspicions about Trevor's management. Trevor ran the bar through intimidation and favoritism. Staff he liked, mostly young, conventionally attractive servers, who laughed at his jokes and tolerated inappropriate comments, received good shifts, prime sections, lenient treatment when they made mistakes. Staff he didn't like received opposite treatment, bad shifts, difficult sections, harsh discipline for minor errors. Lena clearly fell in the second category. Adrian watched Trevor assign her the worst sections, tables near the kitchen where food smells were strongest, booths with uncomfortable seating customers complained about, areas farthest from the bar making drink service most difficult. He'd watched Trevor blame her for mistakes other servers made, discipline her publicly while handling others' errors privately, assign her tasks outside her job description while exempting favored employees from similar requirements. And through it all, Lena had maintained remarkable grace. She'd never argued back beyond quiet attempts at boundary setting. She'd never complained to customers about unfair treatment. She'd simply kept providing excellent service despite increasingly difficult working conditions. Adrian had also observed how other customers treated Lena versus other servers. Several times, he'd watched obviously wealthy customers ignore Lena's greeting, request different servers, or leave minimal tips despite her excellent service. The pattern had been unmistakable. Lena's race was affecting how certain customers responded to her, and Trevor was either oblivious to this dynamic or actively enabling it through his section assignments and public treatment. During his 6th visit, Adrian had made a decision. He'd gathered enough information, he'd seen the problems clearly. It was time to act, but not just by firing Trevor and moving on. Adrian was going to address this situation in a way that recognized Lena's worth, protected her from retaliation, and sent a message to all his locations about what Cole's bars actually stood for. That evening, Adrian had dressed in his usual business attire, tailored suit, expensive watch, polished shoes, and had arrived at the downtown location during the dinner rush. He'd walked in with the confident presence of someone who owned the place, because he did. The hostess had recognized him immediately, her eyes widening. "Mr. Cole, we didn't know you were back in town. Let me get Trevor." "That won't be necessary," Adrian had said smoothly. "I'd like a table in Lena's section, please." The hostess had looked confused. "Lena, she's working the back section tonight. Let me seat you somewhere better." "Lena's section is perfect," Adrian had insisted firmly. "Table for 1, please." He'd been seated at a corner booth in the section Trevor had assigned, Lena confirming Adrian's observation that she consistently received the worst locations. Lena had approached the table, clearly exhausted from another difficult shift, her professional smile in place until she'd recognized Adrian. Her expression had shifted through confusion. She'd obviously recognized him from his previous visits, but he'd been dressed completely differently before settling on professional courtesy. "Welcome back," she'd said carefully. "You're looking different tonight." "Very different," Adrian had agreed. "Lena, do you know who I am?" She'd shaken her head. "A regular customer who tips really well, Adrian Cole." He'd introduced himself properly. "I own this bar. I own the whole chain, actually. And I've been visiting for the past 2 weeks, dressed as a broke customer, to see how my business actually operates when management doesn't know I'm watching." Lena's eyes had widened. You're Mr. Cole? The owner?" "I am," Adrian had confirmed. "And Lena, I owe you an apology. I've been watching you get mistreated by my manager, by some customers, and I didn't intervene immediately. I wanted to understand the full scope of the problem before acting, but that meant you endured 2 more weeks of Trevor's behavior, and I'm sorry for that. I don't understand, Lena had said, clearly struggling to process this revelation. Why would you pretend to be a regular customer? Because people perform when they know the boss is watching, Adrian had explained. I needed to see the truth, and the truth is that you're the best employee in this location, maybe in my entire chain. You treat every customer with genuine kindness, regardless of how they're dressed or how much they spend. You maintain professionalism, despite being publicly humiliated by your manager. You work twice as hard as anyone else here without complaint. You represent everything Cole's Bars is supposed to be. Lena had looked overwhelmed, tears forming in her eyes. Mr. Cole, I just do my job. I don't need. Trevor's fired, Adrian had continued, his voice firm. Effective immediately. I'm personally handling management here until I can hire someone who actually embodies our company values. And Lena, I'd like to offer you a position as assistant manager training under me directly, with substantial pay increase, better hours, actual respect for your contributions. Why? Lena had whispered. Mr. Cole, I'm just a waitress. I don't have management experience. Why would you offer me this? Because leadership isn't about credentials, Adrian had said. It's about character. And Lena, you've demonstrated more character in 2 weeks than most people show in a lifetime. You treated a customer you thought was broke with the same kindness you'd show anyone. You maintained dignity despite being treated poorly. You represent the values I want, leading my business. The management skills I can teach you, the character you already have. Lena had been crying openly now, clearly overwhelmed. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Adrian had encouraged gently. Take the opportunity. Let me show you what you're capable of becoming. Yes, Lena had managed through tears. Thank you, Mr. Cole. Yes. And in that moment, sitting in the worst section of his downtown bar, offering a promotion to a waitress who'd shown him more genuine kindness than anyone in recent memory, Adrian had felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just about fixing a management problem or recognizing a good employee. This was about something more, something he hadn't expected when he'd started this undercover investigation. He'd come looking for evidence of poor management. What he'd found was a woman who'd reminded him what actually mattered, not wealth or status or power, but how you treated people when you had nothing to gain from kindness. And Adrian had realized that Lena wasn't just going to help him fix his bar. She was going to change his entire life. Millionaire pretends to be poor at his bar black. Waitress's response left him speechless. The first week after Adrian revealed his identity and promoted Lena to assistant manager was transformative for the downtown location. Trevor had been escorted out that same evening by security, his termination processed immediately. Adrian had addressed the entire staff during a meeting the following morning, explaining the changes and his expectations going forward. I've been observing operations here for 2 weeks while pretending to be a regular customer, Adrian had told the assembled employees. What I witnessed was unacceptable discriminatory treatment of customers based on appearance, favoritism among staff, public humiliation of employees, violations of our company values at every level. That ends today. He gestured to Lena standing beside him. Lena Hart has been promoted to assistant manager. She'll be training under me directly for the next several months, learning every aspect of management while I personally oversee this location. Lena exemplifies everything Cole's Bars should be: genuine kindness, professional excellence, treating every person with dignity regardless of circumstances. That's what I expect from all of you. The staff response had been mixed. Some employees, particularly those Trevor had favored, had looked resentful of Lena's sudden promotion. Others had seemed relieved that Trevor's toxic leadership was ending, and a few had approached Lena privately after the meeting, expressing genuine support. You deserved this, Marcus, one of the other servers, had told Lena. Trevor treated you terribly and you never let it make you bitter. I'm glad Mr. Cole recognized what you bring to this place. But not everyone had been so supportive. That first week, Adrian had witnessed subtle resistance to Lena's authority servers, ignoring her instructions, questioning her decisions, deliberately making her job more difficult. He'd addressed it directly during staff meetings and individual conversations, making clear that undermining Lena meant undermining him. I chose Lena for this position because she has the character and values I want leading my business, Adrian had told one particularly resistant server. If you can't respect her authority, you're welcome to seek employment elsewhere. Cole's Bars doesn't tolerate discrimination or insubordination. Lena herself had struggled initially with the transition from server to management. Years of being treated poorly had created habits of deference that didn't serve her well in a leadership role. Adrian had worked with her patiently, teaching her to assert authority confidently, make decisions without constantly seeking approval, hold staff accountable while maintaining compassion. You're not being mean when you correct someone's mistake, Adrian had coached her after she'd hesitated to address a server who'd been rude to customers. You're maintaining standards that benefit everyone, employees, customers, the business. Leadership requires being comfortable with occasional discomfort. They'd worked together 12 to 14 hours daily that first month, Adrian teaching Lena everything from inventory management to staff scheduling to financial analysis. He'd been impressed by how quickly she'd absorbed new concepts, how thoughtfully she'd approached problems, how naturally she'd balanced operational efficiency with genuine care for employees. You're a natural at this, Adrian had told her after watching her successfully mediate a conflict between kitchen staff and servers about communication breakdowns. Lena, you have leadership instincts that can't be taught. The technical skills were just filling in gaps. Working so closely together, Adrian had discovered more about Lena's background and current circumstances. She'd shared about her mother's death 2 years earlier after a long battle with cancer, medical bills totaling over $60,000 that Lena was still paying off despite her mother having insurance. She'd talked about growing up in a loving but financially struggling household. Being the first in her family to attend college, she'd completed 2 years before having to drop out to care for her dying mother, her dream of eventually finishing her degree in hospitality management. I kept thinking I'd go back to school once the bills were paid off, Lena had admitted during a late evening when they'd been reviewing quarterly reports together. But the bills never seem to get smaller. I send every extra dollar to the hospital, but with interest and payment plans, I'm barely making progress. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever be free of that debt. How much do you still owe? Adrian had asked. About $38,000, Lena had said, exhaustion evident in her voice. It feels impossible, but Mom would have done anything for me. Paying her medical bills feels like honoring her sacrifice. Adrian had made a note in his phone. The next day, he'd had his accountant draw up a check to the hospital for the full remaining balance of Lena's mother's medical debt. He'd presented it to Lena that evening after their shift ended. What is this? Lena had asked, staring at the check with confusion. Payment for your mother's medical bills, Adrian had explained. Consider it a signing bonus for your management position. You shouldn't spend the next decade paying off debt from caring for your dying mother, Lena. That's an impossible burden. Lena had looked at the check, then at Adrian, tears forming. Adrian, this is $38,000. I can't accept this. It's too much. It's a drop in the ocean compared to what I have, Adrian had said honestly. Lena, I could lose this amount in a bad stock market day and not notice. But for you, it's freedom from a debt that's been crushing you for 2 years. Please let me do this, not as your boss, but as someone who cares about your well-being. Why? Lena had whispered. Why do you keep helping me? First the promotion, now this. Adrian, I don't understand what you're getting from this. I'm getting the satisfaction of seeing someone I respect freed from an unfair burden, Adrian had replied. Lena, American healthcare is broken. You shouldn't be in debt for taking care of your dying mother. I can't fix the whole system, but I can fix your situation. Please let me. Lena had cried then deep, relieved sobs that had spoken to years of crushing financial stress suddenly lifted. Adrian had let her process without trying to stop the tears, understanding this was release of impossible weight she'd been carrying alone. When she'd finally composed herself, Lena had looked at Adrian with an expression he couldn't quite read. Thank you doesn't feel adequate. Adrian, you've changed my entire life in a month. The promotion, the debt payment. I don't know how to express what this means. Just keep being exactly who you are, Adrian had said. That's all I want, Lena. Keep treating people with kindness, keep leading with integrity, keep showing everyone what genuine character looks like. 3 months into Lena's training, the downtown location had been transformed. Customer satisfaction scores had improved dramatically. Staff turnover had stopped. People wanted to work at a location managed by someone who actually cared about them. Revenue had increased as word spread about the improved atmosphere and service quality. Adrian had been preparing to step back from daily management, confident Lena could handle the role independently, when corporate had contacted him about a problem at another location. The original Cole's Bar, his grandfather's place, the one that had started the entire chain, was struggling. The manager had quit abruptly, staff morale was terrible, and the location risked closing for the first time in its 60-year history. "I need to go handle this personally," Adrian had told Lena during their morning meeting. "It's my grandfather's original bar. I can't let it close. But Lena, I'm leaving you in complete charge here. No assistant manager title anymore. You're the general manager as of today, with full authority over operations, staffing, budgets, everything. I trust you completely." "Adrian, I've only been training for 3 months, Lena had protested. "What if I mess something up? What if I make bad decisions? Then you'll learn from them, same as I did when I was starting out," Adrian had said confidently. "Lena, you're ready. You've proven yourself capable of handling everything this role requires. Stop doubting yourself and lead." Adrian had spent 6 weeks at the original Cole's Bar, implementing similar changes to what he'd done downtown, addressing toxic management, recognizing undervalued staff, rebuilding culture around the values his grandfather had established. And throughout those 6 weeks, he'd stayed in constant contact with Lena, reviewing her decisions, offering guidance, celebrating her successes. But their daily calls had gradually shifted from purely professional to increasingly personal. They'd talk about work for 30 minutes, then spend another hour discussing everything else: their childhoods, their dreams, their perspectives on life and relationships, and what actually mattered. Adrian had found himself looking forward to those calls more than any other part of his day, missing Lena's presence in ways that went beyond just professional partnership. When Adrian had finally returned to the downtown location after 6 weeks away, he'd walked in to find the bar running flawlessly. Lena had not just maintained operations, she'd improved them, implementing new scheduling systems that reduced overtime costs while improving employee satisfaction, creating a mentorship program, pairing experienced staff with new hires, developing customer loyalty initiatives that had increased repeat business. "This is incredible," Adrian had said after reviewing her reports. "Lena, you didn't just manage, you innovated. You made this location better than it was when I left." "I had a good teacher," Lena had replied with a smile. "Adrian, everything I did came from watching how you lead with respect for employees, focus on long-term sustainability rather than just short-term profits, genuine care about creating positive experiences for customers. That's you implementing principles, not just copying my actions," Adrian had corrected. "Lena, this is your leadership. Own it." That evening, after closing, they'd celebrated her successful solo management with drinks at the bar. Adrian had poured them both expensive whiskey from the top shelf, raising his glass in toast. "To Lena Hart," he'd said, "the best hire I've ever made, the fastest learner I've ever trained, and someone who's reminded me what genuine integrity looks like." To Adrian Cole, Lena had replied, who saw potential in a waitress getting yelled at by her manager and chose to invest in her rather than just fire the manager and move on. "You changed my life, Adrian. I'll never forget that." They talked for hours that evening, the conversation flowing naturally as it always did between them. And at some point, Adrian had realized his feelings for Lena had shifted beyond just professional respect or friendly affection into something deeper, something romantic that he'd been trying to ignore because of their professional relationship. "Lena," Adrian had said eventually, the late hour and whiskey lowering his usual careful boundaries, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Lena had replied, her guard down in a way it rarely was. "Are you seeing anyone? Romantically, I mean." Lena had looked surprised by the question. "No," Between working here and caring for my mom before she died, I haven't had time or energy for dating. Why? Because I need to be honest with you about something, Adrian had said, his heart pounding. And if you're involved with someone, I need to stop this conversation before I say something inappropriate. I'm not involved with anyone, Lena had confirmed, her expression suggesting she'd guessed where this was heading. Adrian, what do you need to be honest about? I have feelings for you, Adrian had admitted. Romantic feelings that go beyond just professional respect or friendship. Lena, I've been falling for you over these months, working together. Your kindness, your intelligence, your strength, your integrity, everything about you draws me in. But you're my employee, which makes this complicated. I don't want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. If you don't feel the same way, we can maintain our professional relationship, and I won't mention this again. Lena had been quiet for a long moment, processing his words. Finally, I have feelings for you too. I've been trying to ignore them because you're my boss and because I didn't want you to think I was only interested because of what you've done for me, the promotion, paying my debt. But Adrian, my feelings aren't about gratitude. They're about who you are. You're kind without being performative about it. You treat everyone with respect regardless of their position. You genuinely care about creating positive impact rather than just accumulating wealth. I've fallen for you too. So, what do we do about this? Adrian had asked. Because I don't want our romantic involvement to compromise your professional advancement or create uncomfortable power dynamics. Maybe I shouldn't work directly for you anymore, Lena had suggested. If I managed a different location, we wouldn't have the same boss-employee relationship. Or I could transition you to a corporate role, Adrian had offered. Regional operations manager, overseeing multiple locations. You'd report to corporate rather than me specifically, which would reduce the power dynamic issues. They talked through various possibilities, ultimately deciding Lena would transition to a regional role, overseeing 4 locations, including the downtown bar. The change would give her broader experience and advancement while creating appropriate professional distance that would allow their personal relationship to develop without the complications of direct reporting. The transition had happened over the following month. Adrian had promoted Michael, the assistant manager Lena had been mentoring, to general manager of the downtown location. Lena had moved to a corporate office position with responsibility for operations across 4 bars. And once the professional boundaries had been appropriately established, Adrian had asked Lena on their first official date. He'd chosen a restaurant completely unaffiliated with Cole's bars, wanting their date to be about them as people rather than their professional connection. They talked for 4 hours over dinner, the conversation as natural and engaging as their late-night bar talks, but without the professional context framing everything. This feels different, Lena had observed midway through the evening. Talking to you outside of work context. Good, different, but different. How so? Adrian had asked. At work, there's always this slight formality even when we're being personal. There's still the awareness that you're the owner and I'm an employee. Here, we're just Adrian and Lena. 2 people getting to know each other without professional roles complicating everything. I like just being Adrian and Lena, Adrian had admitted, though I have to say, I fell for you in that professional context. Watching you lead, seeing how you treated employees, observing your integrity in action, those are the things that made me fall in love with you, Lena. You love me? Lena had asked, clearly surprised by his use of that specific word. I do, Adrian had confirmed. I know it's only been a few months since we met, but Lena, these have been the most meaningful months of my life. You've shown me what genuine partnership looks like, what real integrity means, what I want my life to actually be about. Yes, I love you. Lena had reached across the table, taking his hand. I love you too. And Adrian, it's not just gratitude for everything you've done for me, though I am grateful. I love who you are. How you lead with compassion, how you see people's potential when others just see their current circumstances, how you use your resources to help others rather than just accumulating more wealth. I love you. Their relationship had developed steadily over the following year. They dated seriously, navigating the complexities of both working for the same company while maintaining appropriate professional boundaries, learning each other's habits and preferences, building genuine partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. Adrian had met what remained of Lena's family, an aunt who'd helped raise her, two younger cousins Lena mentored, a small but close group of people who'd been there during her mother's illness and death. They'd welcomed Adrian warmly, but had been protective of Lena, clearly wanting to ensure this wealthy businessman wasn't taking advantage of her. "My niece has been through enough," Lena's aunt had told Adrian directly during their first meeting. "I don't care how much money you have. If you hurt her, you'll answer to all of us." "I have no intention of hurting her," Adrian had assured her. "Lena is the most important person in my life. I want to support her dreams, build a future with her, be her partner in everything." Lena had met Adrian's parents during the holidays, wealthy, somewhat distant people who'd been politely cordial, but clearly uncomfortable with their son dating someone from Lena's economic background. Adrian had addressed their subtle classism directly. "Lena is brilliant, kind, and has more integrity than most people I know," Adrian had told his parents firmly. "If you can't respect her, that's a reflection on you, not her. I'd choose her over your approval any day." His parents had gradually warmed to Lena as they'd spent more time with her, recognizing her intelligence and character despite their initial prejudices. And Lena had handled their coolness with the same grace she'd shown, dealing with Trevor's abuse, never confrontational, but maintaining her dignity and refusing to perform or pretend to be someone she wasn't. 2 years after that evening, when Adrian had revealed his identity and promoted Lena from waitress to management, he'd proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant or elaborate public setting, but at the original Coles bar, his grandfather's place, now thriving again under management that embodied the values it had been built on. They'd closed the bar for a private dinner, just the two of them in the space where Adrian's grandfather had started the business 60 years earlier. Adrian had talked about his grandfather's philosophy that bars weren't just about serving alcohol, but about creating community, about making people feel welcome and valued, about treating everyone with dignity regardless of their circumstances. "My grandfather would have loved you," Adrian had said. "You embody everything he believed bars should be. And Lena, you've helped me remember what he taught me, that success isn't about how much you accumulate, but about how you treat people, especially when you have power and they don't." He'd pulled out a ring, beautiful but not ostentatious, clearly chosen with thought for Lena's actual taste rather than just expense. "Lena Hart, will you marry me? Will you be my partner, not just in business but in life? Will you help me build something meaningful rather than just profitable?" Lena had cried happy tears this time, tears of joy rather than the relief she'd cried when her debt had been paid or the overwhelmed emotion when she'd been promoted. Yes, she'd managed. "Adrian, yes. I want all of it. Partnership, building something meaningful, creating life together. Yes." They'd married 6 months later in a ceremony that reflected both their values, elegant but not ostentatious, focused on celebrating their commitment rather than displaying wealth, attended by family and the Coles bar's employees who'd become like family over the years. In his vows, Adrian had said, "Lena, 2 years ago you showed kindness to someone you thought was a broke customer who wouldn't tip well. You treated me with dignity when others ignored me. You maintained integrity despite being treated poorly by people with power over you. You reminded me what genuine character looks like, not performing kindness when it benefits you, but being kind consistently because that's who you are. You've transformed my life," Adrian had continued, "not just by being an excellent employee or even by being someone I fell in love with, but by showing me what I want my life to be about. Before meeting you, I'd built a successful business, but I'd lost sight of why success mattered. You reminded me that the point isn't accumulating wealth, it's using whatever resources we have to help others, to create positive experiences, to treat everyone with the dignity they deserve." In her vows, Lena had said, "Adrian, you saw potential in me when I'd stopped believing in my own capabilities. You offered opportunity when I was just trying to survive. You invested in my growth without expecting anything beyond my best effort. You showed me that accepting help when you need it isn't weakness, it's wisdom. and you demonstrated what good leadership looks like, leading with integrity, treating people with respect, using power to lift others rather than dominate them. But what I love most about you, Lena had concluded, isn't what you did for me professionally or even that you paid off my debt. What I love is who you are when nobody's watching. The way you treat service workers with respect, the way you remember people's names and ask about their lives, the way you genuinely care about creating positive impact rather than just looking generous. Adrian, you're good in ways that have nothing to do with your wealth. That's who I'm choosing to build life with. 5 years after their wedding, Lena had become VP of Operations for Cole's Bars, overseeing all 12 locations with plans to expand to 15. She'd implemented company-wide policies, supporting working families, subsidized childcare, flexible scheduling, educational assistance programs, mental health benefits. Under her leadership, Cole's Bars had become known not just for good food and atmosphere, but for being an excellent employer that genuinely valued employees. Adrian had stepped back from day-to-day operations, focusing instead on strategic expansion and the charitable foundation he and Lena had established together. The Cole Heart Foundation provided grants to service industry workers facing medical debt, housing instability, or other financial crises, helping people navigate the kinds of challenges Lena had faced. We've helped over 300 families in 2 years, Lena had reported during a foundation board meeting. Medical debt relief, housing assistance, educational grants providing resources that help people move from crisis to stability. This work feels like honoring everything Mum taught me about helping others. At home, they'd built life characterized by genuine partnership. They'd bought a house in a middle-class neighborhood, comfortable but not ostentatious, close to parks and community spaces Adrian had never engaged with during his wealthy bachelor days. They'd become involved in local initiatives supporting service workers, advocating for living wages and labor protections. "Remember when I asked you for water in my broke customer disguise?" Adrian had said one evening as they'd cooked dinner together. "And you served me with the same kindness you'd have shown anyone." Lena, that moment changed my life. Not just because it led to us meeting, but because you reminded me what actually matters. "What matters?" Lena had prompted, smiling. "How we treat people when we have nothing to gain from kindness," Adrian had replied. "You were exhausted, underpaid, being treated terribly by Trevor, but you still offered genuine kindness to someone you thought was broke and wouldn't tip well. That's character, Lena. That's the kind of person I want to be, someone who treats everyone with dignity, regardless of what they can offer in return." "You already are that person," Lena had assured him. "Adrian, you could have just fired Trevor and moved on. Instead, you invested in promoting someone who everyone else had overlooked. You paid my debt when you could have just given me a raise. You create policies helping all your employees, not just the ones who directly benefit you. You're already living those values." 10 years after Adrian had walked into his bar disguised as a broke customer and had met Lena, they'd celebrated the anniversary at the downtown location, now thriving, staffed by employees who felt valued, known for both excellent service and treating workers well. 10 years since I pretended to be poor and you showed me what kindness actually looks like," Adrian had marveled. "Lena, that was the most important night of my life, not just because I met you, but because you reminded me what I'd built this business to be, not just profitable but meaningful, not just successful but genuinely helping create positive experiences for everyone who engages with it. And you showed me what's possible when someone with resources chooses to help rather than exploit," Lena had replied. "Adrian, you could have used your wealth for selfish purposes. Instead, you've used it to lift employees, help families in crisis, create opportunities for people who just need someone to believe in them. That's what I love about you, not that you have wealth, but what you choose to do with it." They'd stood together in the bar where everything had started, surrounded by employees whose lives had been positively impacted by policies Lena had implemented and resources Adrian had provided. And they'd understood that sometimes the most important moments look ordinary. A waitress serving a broke-looking customer with basic kindness, a business owner choosing to invest in overlooked employees until you recognize their true significance. From that single interaction had come genuine love, meaningful partnership, business practices that actually valued employees, a foundation helping hundreds of families, and proof that character reveals itself in how we treat people when we have nothing to gain from kindness. 15 years after Adrian had walked into his bar disguised as a broke customer and had met Lena, they stood together at the opening of Cole's Bar number 25, their largest expansion yet, a flagship location in downtown Chicago that would serve as the model for future growth. The space was magnificent, exposed brick, warm lighting, comfortable seating designed to encourage lingering, an atmosphere that said, "Everyone belongs here," rather than, "This is exclusive." "This is what we've been building toward," Adrian said to Lena as they toured the nearly complete space the day before opening. "A location that embodies everything we've learned about creating spaces that serve everyone, customers and employees, with dignity and excellence." Lena had run her hand along the polished bar top, examining the craftsmanship. "The design is beautiful, but what I love most is what's behind it. The employee lounge with comfortable seating, the kitchen designed for efficiency but also safety, the scheduling system that actually considers employees' lives outside work. Adrian, we've created something genuinely different from typical hospitality industry practices." They had indeed created something different. Over 15 years, they'd transformed Cole's Bars from a 12-location chain with standard industry practices into a 25-location model for how hospitality businesses could operate successfully while genuinely valuing employees. Every location now offered comprehensive benefits, living wages that exceeded local minimums, profit-sharing programs, flexible scheduling that accommodated employees' personal lives, subsidized childcare, educational assistance, mental health support, and clear advancement pathways. "People said we'd go bankrupt implementing these policies," Adrian had reflected during multiple interviews as their practices had gained national attention. "They said you can't pay living wages and still be profitable in the restaurant industry. They said offering comprehensive benefits would destroy our margins. But our numbers prove otherwise. We're more profitable than we've ever been, because happy employees create better customer experiences, which generates loyalty and repeat business." The Colehart Foundation had expanded even more dramatically. What had started as a modest effort providing medical debt relief and housing assistance had grown into a comprehensive support network, serving over 2,000 service industry workers annually. The foundation offered financial assistance for emergencies, job training for advancement, mental health counseling, legal advocacy for workers facing unfair treatment, and policy work advocating for industry-wide reforms. "We've helped families navigate bankruptcy, escape abusive work situations, access healthcare when they couldn't afford it, find stable housing when they were facing eviction," Lena had explained during a foundation board meeting. "But more importantly, we've created pathways for people to move from survival to thriving, education programs that help servers become managers, culinary training that helps kitchen staff become chefs, business courses that help experienced workers open their own establishments." The foundation's work had caught attention from policymakers. Lena had been invited to testify before state legislatures about labor practices in the hospitality industry, providing first-hand testimony about both the challenges workers faced and the feasibility of reforms. Her experience transitioning from a waitress facing discrimination and impossible medical debt to a successful executive gave her credibility no policy expert could match. "I lived the reality of working in this industry without adequate support," Lena had told one legislative committee. "I experienced managers who abused power, customers who discriminated, wages that didn't cover basic needs, debt from medical emergencies that felt insurmountable. But I also experienced what's possible when employers choose to do better, when they pay living wages, offer comprehensive benefits, treat workers with dignity, create advancement opportunities." Cole's Bars proves profitable hospitality businesses can exist while genuinely valuing employees. The question isn't whether better practices are possible, it's whether we have the will to implement them. Her testimony, combined with the Colehart Foundation's research documenting outcomes of their support programs, had contributed to several states passing stronger labor protections for service industry workers. Adrian and Lena had become known not just as successful business leaders, but as advocates for systemic change in how the hospitality industry treated employees. At home, their life had deepened and matured over 15 years. They'd weathered challenges every long-term relationship, faced disagreements about business decisions, stressful periods when expansion stretched them both thin, grief when Lena's aunt had passed away, the complex navigation of being both spouses and business partners working toward shared goals. "We're good at this," Lena had observed one evening as they'd reviewed financial projections for the Chicago location while cooking dinner together, a routine that had become sacred. An hour each evening when work talk mixed with personal connection over the shared task of preparing food. Working together, I mean. Most couples would struggle with this much professional overlap, but we figured out how to be partners in both contexts without losing ourselves. "Because we respect each other's expertise," Adrian had replied, stirring pasta while Lena chopped vegetables. "You know operations and employee relations better than I do at this point. I defer to your judgment in those areas. I know strategic expansion and financial planning. You trust my decisions there. We're genuinely collaborative rather than competitive. And we keep our marriage distinct from the business," Lena had added. "These dinners, our weekends away, the parts of our lives that aren't about Cole's bars, we protect that space. The business is important, but it's not our entire identity." They'd never had children, a choice they'd made deliberately after extensive discussion. Both had felt called to invest their energy in the business and foundation work, in creating systems that served thousands of families rather than focusing on raising their own children. Some people had questioned this choice, particularly Lena's family members who'd hoped for great-grandchildren. But Adrian and Lena had been confident in their decision. "We're nurturing something different," Lena had explained to her aunt before she'd passed away. "Not biological children, but a business that employs 3,000 people, a foundation that serves thousands of families, policies that might influence how the entire industry treats workers. That's our legacy, creating systems that help people rather than just our own descendants." 20 years after that transformative evening when Adrian had pretended to be poor and Lena had shown him genuine kindness, they'd been invited to speak at a hospitality industry conference about their business model and advocacy work. The keynote address had drawn an overflow crowd, hundreds of restaurant owners, managers, and industry leaders curious about how Cole's bars maintained profitability while implementing labor practices most considered financially impossible. Adrian had opened the presentation. 20 years ago, I disguised myself as a broke customer to observe how my downtown bar actually operated when management didn't know I was watching. What I witnessed was discrimination against customers based on appearance, toxic management practices, mistreatment of employees, violations of every value my grandfather had built our business on. But I also witnessed something beautiful, a waitress named Lena Hart treating me with genuine kindness, despite every reason not to. He'd clicked to a slide showing the original downtown location. Lena was exhausted, underpaid, publicly humiliated by her manager, working double shifts to cover staffing gaps others created. She could have ignored me, a poorly dressed customer other servers had written off as not worth their time. Instead, she offered authentic kindness, professional excellence, genuine care for my experience, despite having nothing to gain from the effort. "That evening changed everything," Adrian had continued. "I fired the toxic manager, promoted Lena to management, and began questioning every practice in our business, not just at that one location, but systemically across our entire operation. And over 20 years, Lena and I have rebuilt Cole's bars around a simple principle. Treating employees well isn't just morally right, it's strategically smart." Lena had taken over the presentation, walking the audience through specific policies and their outcomes. Living wages that exceed local minimums by significant margins, our servers average $45,000 annually, including tips. Our kitchen staff start at $18 per hour, when local minimum is $12. Comprehensive benefits including health insurance, mental health coverage, paid family leave, retirement contributions. Subsidized childcare so parents can actually work without sacrificing family well-being. Flexible scheduling that accommodates employees' personal lives, clear advancement pathways so people aren't stuck in entry-level positions indefinitely. She'd clicked to financial data showing profitability trends. Industry wisdom says you can't afford these policies and remain profitable. Our numbers prove otherwise. We're more profitable than we were 20 years ago before implementing these changes. Why? Because happy employees create better customer experiences, which generates loyalty, which produces steady revenue. Our turnover is 1/3 the industry average, which saves massive costs in recruitment and training. Our customer satisfaction scores are consistently top 10% nationally. Our locations become community gathering places rather than just transaction spaces. But beyond business metrics, Lena had continued, her voice carrying the weight of personal experience. These policies change lives. I lived the alternative, working impossible shifts to cover inadequate wages, crushed by medical debt from my mother's illness, stuck without advancement pathways, treated as disposable labor rather than valued employee. When Adrian invested in promoting me, paid my mother's medical debt, provided education assistance, he gave me more than resources. He gave me belief that I deserved better, that accepting help was wisdom, not weakness, that my potential mattered. We built the Coalheart Foundation to systematize that support, Lena had explained, providing the kind of comprehensive assistance I needed to thousands of service industry workers. Last year alone, we helped 2,000 families with everything from emergency financial assistance to job training to policy advocacy. We're trying to change not just how Coles Bars operates, but how the entire industry thinks about labor practices. The presentation had concluded with a challenge. We're sharing our complete policy manual, financial outcomes, and implementation strategies publicly, Adrian had announced. Everything we've learned about creating profitable businesses that genuinely value employees, we're making it available free to any hospitality business willing to implement similar practices. Because this isn't about Coles Bars maintaining competitive advantage. This is about transforming an entire industry's approach to labor. The response had been mixed. Some owners had approached them afterward, excited to implement similar practices. Others had been skeptical, questioning the financial viability, suggesting Coles Bars was somehow unique and the model couldn't replicate elsewhere, arguing their markets or locations faced constraints, making these policies impossible. They're making excuses, Lena had said somewhat bitterly as they'd flown home after the conference. The same excuses I heard for years about why servers couldn't make living wages, why comprehensive benefits were impossible, why advancement opportunities were unrealistic. The truth is, they don't want to change. They profit from the current exploitative model and don't care about the human cost. Some don't want to change, Adrian had agreed, but others genuinely don't know how. That's why we shared everything publicly, removing the excuse that implementation is too complex or mysterious. But Lena, we can't force industry-wide transformation. All we can do is model an alternative, prove its viability, and support those willing to try. 25 years after that transformative evening, Coles Bars had grown to 35 locations across 8 states. But more significantly, over 80 other hospitality businesses had adopted their labor practices model, implementing living wages, comprehensive benefits, and employee-centered policies based on Coles' publicly shared framework. The movement had gained momentum, with several major cities passing ordinances requiring certain labor standards in the hospitality industry, reforms directly influenced by the Coalheart Foundation's advocacy and research. We're seeing systemic change, Lena had told Adrian during their 25th wedding anniversary celebration, not just in our company but across the industry. 35 Coles locations treating employees well is good. 80 other businesses adopting similar practices serves maybe 15,000 workers. Cities passing stronger labor protections impacts hundreds of thousands. Adrian, we're actually changing how things work. You're changing how things work, Adrian had corrected. Lena, I provided initial resources and business expertise, but you've been the driving force, testifying before legislatures, leading the foundation, mentoring other business owners, proving through your own journey that these practices transform lives. This movement exists because of your leadership. It exists because of partnership, Lena had insisted. Adrian, without your willingness to implement policies others said were impossible, without your financial investment in the foundation, without your support for my advocacy work, even when it created controversy, none of this happens. We did this together. Their anniversary celebration had been characteristically modest, despite their wealth dinner at the original downtown Coles Bar location, surrounded by employees who'd worked with them for years in the space where everything had started. Michael, who'd risen from server to regional manager over his 15 years with the company, had given a toast. 25 years ago, Mr. Cole walked into this bar disguised as a broke customer to see how we treated people when we thought no one important was watching. Lena served him with the kindness she showed everyone, not because he might be wealthy, but because treating people well was who she was. That moment changed both their lives, but it also changed ours. Because they built a company that treats employees like humans with lives and needs and potential rather than just disposable labor. They've made working here genuinely good, not just tolerable, but actually fulfilling. And they've inspired other businesses to do the same. That's legacy, not what you accumulate, but how you transform the systems you're part of. 30 years after that evening, Adrian and Lena stood together at a congressional hearing where Lena had been invited to testify about proposed federal labor standards for the hospitality industry. She was 67 now, Adrian 78, both still actively involved in Coles Bar's management and foundation work, though they'd gradually been transitioning leadership to the next generation. I started in this industry 30 years ago as a waitress facing discrimination, impossible medical debt, and toxic management, Lena had testified. My personal experience isn't unique. Millions of hospitality workers navigate similar challenges daily. Low wages that don't cover basic living costs, inadequate benefits that leave families vulnerable during medical emergencies, managers who abuse authority without accountability, customers who feel entitled to mistreat service workers, an entire system that treats hospitality labor as disposable rather than valuable. But I also experienced what's possible when employers choose better practices, Lena had continued, her voice strong despite her age. When my husband, who owned the restaurant where I worked, promoted me to management, supported my education, helped relieve my crushing medical debt, he didn't just help me individually. He demonstrated that investing in employees creates better business outcomes. Over 30 years, we've built Coles Bars into a 35-location chain with above-industry profitability, while implementing labor practices most consider impossible: living wages, comprehensive benefits, profit sharing, advancement pathways, respect for employees' humanity. The proposed federal standards you're considering, Lena had concluded, aren't radical or unprecedented. They're basic protections ensuring hospitality workers can support themselves and their families with dignity. I'm living proof these standards are compatible with profitable business operations. The question isn't feasibility, it's whether we value hospitality workers enough to implement protections they deserve. Her testimony, combined with advocacy from hundreds of other workers and the Cole Hart Foundation's extensive research documenting positive outcomes of better labor practices, had contributed to the Hospitality Workers Protection Act, passing both houses of Congress the following year. The legislation established federal minimum wage standards for tipped workers, required paid sick leave, created anti-discrimination protections, and mandated clear advancement pathway documentation reforms that would impact millions of workers nationally. We did it, Lena had said to Adrian the evening after the legislation passed, both of them watching news coverage together. 30 years of advocacy, thousands of workers sharing their stories, countless hours of testimony and research, and organizing it actually worked. Millions of hospitality workers will have better protections because we refuse to accept that exploitation was inevitable. You did it, Adrian had corrected gently. Lena, I supported your work, but you were the leader. Your testimony, your foundation, your refusal to accept that things couldn't change, that's what created this victory. We did it together, Lena had insisted one final time, leaning against him. Partnership, remember? Your resources and my experience. Your business expertise and my advocacy, neither of us creates this alone. Together, we transformed not just our company but national policy. That's the power of genuine partnership, two people bringing complementary strengths toward shared goals that neither could achieve individually. 35 years after that transformative evening, Adrian passed away peacefully at 83 after a brief illness. He'd lived to see federal labor protections for hospitality workers, Cole's Bars recognized as a model for ethical business practices, the Cole Heart Foundation serving over 50,000 families, and genuine systemic change in how an entire industry approached labor. At his funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives he'd touched, employees from across Cole's Bars, 35 locations, families served by the foundation, policymakers who'd worked with him on advocacy efforts, business owners who'd adopted his labor practices model. But it was Lena's eulogy that captured who Adrian had truly been. 35 years ago, Adrian walked into his bar disguised as a broke customer to see how his employees treated people when they thought no one important was watching. What he witnessed that evening changed his life and eventually changed thousands of others' lives too. He saw a waitress treating a poorly dressed customer with genuine kindness, despite having every reason to be bitter about her circumstances. And instead of just appreciating the kindness, Adrian acted on it, promoting me to management, supporting my growth, building a company around the values he'd witnessed that evening. But Adrian's legacy isn't the 35 locations or the foundation or even the federal legislation his work influenced, Lena had continued, her voice strong despite obvious grief. His legacy is demonstrating what's possible when people with resources choose to use them, helping others thrive, rather than just accumulating more wealth. He proved profitable businesses can exist while genuinely valuing employees. He showed that investing in people creates better outcomes than exploiting them. He lived the belief that how you treat people, especially people with less power, reveals your true character. Adrian saw potential in a waitress being publicly humiliated by her manager, Lena had concluded. He invested in that potential without knowing where it would lead. And from that single choice came genuine love, meaningful partnership, business practices that served employees well, a foundation helping thousands of families, and ultimately, policy changes improving conditions for millions of workers. That's what one person choosing compassion over exploitation can create. That's Adrian's legacy, proof that how we treat people matters, that using resources to help others creates better outcomes for everyone, and that genuine partnership multiplies what either person could achieve alone. Lena had lived another 12 years after Adrian's death, spending that time ensuring the foundation continued with the values they'd built together and mentoring the next generation of Cole's Bars leadership. She'd remained actively involved in advocacy work, testifying in support of additional labor protections, celebrating as more states and municipalities implemented stronger standards, witnessing the gradual transformation of hospitality, industry, labor practices from exploitative norm toward genuinely valuing workers. When Lena passed at 79, her funeral drew crowds similar to Adrian's employees whose careers she'd shaped, families whose lives the foundation had changed, policymakers she'd influenced, business owners she'd mentored toward ethical practices. Michael, now CEO of Cole's Bars after decades working his way through various management roles, gave her eulogy. Lena Hart started at Cole's Bars 37 years ago as a waitress facing discrimination, impossible medical debt, and toxic management. She could have become bitter, letting that mistreatment harden her into someone cynical and closed. Instead, she maintained kindness, even in impossible circumstances. And when someone with resources recognized her worth and offered opportunity, she accepted it with grace and then proved herself capable of far more than anyone had imagined possible. But Lena's legacy isn't her personal success story, Michael had continued. It's what she built beyond herself, the employee policies that transformed Cole's Bars from a standard restaurant chain into a model for ethical hospitality business, the foundation serving 50,000 families over 30 years, the advocacy work that contributed to federal labor protections, the mentorship she provided countless others, helping them recognize their own potential. Lena experienced the worst of hospitality industry labor practices and refused to accept they were inevitable. She spent decades proving better practices were possible and fighting to make them standard rather than exceptional. Every hospitality worker with paid sick leave, living wage, comprehensive benefits, protection from discrimination, clear advancement pathways, they benefit from Lena's refusal to accept that exploitation was inevitable. Michael had concluded. That's her legacy. Not escaping the challenges she faced, but transforming the systems so others wouldn't face them. Lena lived the belief that our responsibility isn't just improving our own circumstances, but creating better conditions for everyone who comes after us. 40 years after that transformative evening when Adrian had disguised himself as a broke customer and Lena had shown him genuine kindness, the Coles Bar's management team gathered at the original downtown location to commemorate the anniversary. The booth where Adrian had sat that first evening had been preserved behind glass, with a comprehensive plaque explaining its significance. In this booth, 40 years ago, Adrian Cole sat disguised as a broke customer, observing how his bar operated when staff didn't know the owner was watching. Lena Hart, then a waitress facing discrimination and impossible circumstances, served him with genuine kindness, despite having every reason to be bitter. That evening changed both their lives and eventually impacted millions of others. Adrian and Lena built Coles Bars into a model for ethical hospitality business, proving companies could be profitable while genuinely valuing employees. They created the Cole Heart Foundation, serving over 50,000 families with comprehensive support. They advocated for labor reforms that contributed to federal protections, benefiting millions of hospitality workers. They demonstrated that how we treat people, especially when we have power, and they don't, reveals our true character. This booth reminds us that sometimes the most important moments look ordinary: a waitress serving a customer with basic kindness, a business owner choosing to invest in overlooked employees until you recognize their true significance. From that single interaction came genuine love, meaningful partnership, transformed business practices, systemic policy changes, and proof that choosing compassion over exploitation creates better outcomes for everyone. Lena Hart, 2008 to 2087, and Adrian Cole, 1997 to 2082, lived these values daily. We honor them by continuing that work, treating every person with dignity, using our resources to help others thrive, refusing to accept that exploitation is inevitable, building systems that serve everyone rather than just those already privileged. Every new Coles Bar's employee learned the story during orientation. Every location displayed photos of Adrian and Lena with explanations of how their relationship had shaped company values. Every foundation grant recipient heard about the medical debt that had nearly crushed Lena and the choice Adrian had made to relieve it. The story had become more than just company law. It was a blueprint for how people with resources should respond when they encounter others facing challenges, how employees should be treated regardless of their circumstances, how genuine partnerships multiply impact beyond what either person achieves alone. And in the end, that was the real miracle of that evening 40 years ago when Adrian had walked into his bar disguised as a broke customer, and Lena had shown him genuine kindness, not that a millionaire had helped a struggling waitress, though that had certainly mattered. The real miracle was that both had chosen to see each other's full humanity. She'd treated him with dignity despite thinking he was broke and wouldn't tip well. He'd recognized her worth despite circumstances that suggested she was just another exploited hospitality worker. Together, they'd built something neither could have created alone: a company that genuinely valued employees, a foundation that served thousands, advocacy work that changed national policy, and a legacy proving that how we treat people when we have nothing to gain from kindness reveals our true character. From one evening of genuine kindness came 40 years of transformed lives, changed systems, and proof that sometimes the most important choices look ordinary: a waitress offering basic courtesy to a poorly dressed customer, a business owner choosing to invest in overlooked employees until you recognize their ripple effects, extending far beyond that initial moment, touching thousands of lives and transforming how entire industries operate. That's the power of choosing compassion over exploitation, partnership over hierarchy, systemic change over individual success. Lessons Adrian and Lena lived daily and passed forward through everyone their lives touched, creating ripples that would continue long after both were gone.